Yeah, so we'll be starting now the first of several sessions that we'll be exploring impact. And so today will be a little more of kind of introductory, getting our, making sure we all have a sense of what it means to do impact evaluation. And then in forthcoming sessions, we'll get a little bit into some of the techniques which are used for impact evaluation. Okay, so that's where we are moving. As you know, the last session, or the last few sessions was on implementation monitoring. And so we are now moving to, so if you think about evaluation of design, evaluation of implementation, and now evaluation of impact, right? So we are moving to that kind of third of those three broad ways of thinking about an intervention of a program. Okay, so that's where we are going. Yeah, I think I need to share screen. Yeah, still not working.
I'm not getting any notification from you, Suraj.
Right. Even I'm trying to.
I have activated multiple participants.
Okay. Now it's working. Yeah, thanks.
Wow.
This is a funny cartoon. Maybe now that I've put it, might as well give you a minute to look at it. So the world of impact evaluation, as we will see, there's a lot of people who use quantitative statistical techniques, a lot of kind of survey data which is crunched. And I know many practitioners get a little bit intimidated or just kind of get a little alienated from that because it is seen as a bit technical. And especially with now there are lots of fancier statistical techniques which are used in this business. So our approach, in these sessions will be to understand what's the idea, right? Now, but specific techniques, if you are interested in, we'll talk about them, and you can follow up and so on. But the more important thing is the idea. So let me start by putting up the questions regarding impact that we had seen in the first one or two sessions early on. So it's been a while, so let's just refresh our memories. So this was a set of questions that now we are going to try to address. And so let's just read these because I think it's important to convince ourselves that these are questions worth asking and trying to answer. Now, whatever the technique and so on, that's a matter of detail, but the general idea behind impact evaluation is really to get a grip of this set of questions. So first, what is the social impact, right? So remember, so far we were looking at the world of design and the world of implementation, right? So activities and outputs and so on. Now we are squarely in the world of what is it that an intervention does, which counts in society, right? So it's not output, but it's outcome, right? And if you remember, the terms like outcome and impact are often used interchangeably. Some people, say that first outcome in society that produces further, changes that we can call longer term impact. So, but a lot of people use terms like outcome and impact interchangeably when we talk of impact evaluation. In other words, we could have renamed it outcome evaluation, right? But the point is, what are the changes in society? So, for example, if you're running an education program, what are the changes in children's learning, in their capacities, in their aspirations, in the way they relate inside their families, right? And so on and so whatever we think, might matter in society, in this classroom, in the school, in the neighborhood, all of that is outcome or impact, right? So of course, the first question is the obvious one. What was the nature of the impact, right? What kind of impact, how much impact? And that is the core question. And then the second is, how do we actually pin it down? So, so what are the appropriate indicators? And we'll talk about this in future sessions, but one of the things which some people say is, even if you run, let us say, an education program, think of TAL, right? Teaching at the right level, or any program that Vikram Shira runs. Often, maybe because of donor requirement or our own way of thinking, we think of the immediate thing. Yeah, children's learning will improve. It will be shown in better maths performance or whatever it is, right? I'm thinking TAL, for example, right? But there might be other kinds of indicators, such as it might improve the confidence of the student, right? It might help them make better sense of their world, even if you're delivering a maths program to them, right? So this question of appropriate indicators becomes interesting and not straightforward, right? If I run a maths program, I might say, oh, maths learning is my impact indicator. Yes, that stands to reason, but there might be many other things, which is why a theory of change becomes important, right? What are the things which get triggered through my intervention? It may not be just maths learning, right? So that's the second question. What are the appropriate indicators? And this you can also link with, I think, what Dvitiya was doing last session, indicators to do with implementation, monitoring, right? Here we are talking about impact. Third question, who was impacted? Who wasn't impacted? Why, right? Fourth, did the impact address the need? After all, ostensibly a program was delivered for in order to meet a particular need, right? Needs assessment, which is the first element of design. Did it do so? But were there unintended consequences, right? Besides the need for which the program was created, maybe there were other things the program did which were unintended. It could be socially, you could say that some things could be positive, some things could be negative. I mean, we can put values or judgments on those, but the point is, it's not just the needs, but it could be other things also, which loops back to question 2. What were the indicators, right? It may not only be the original need indicators. Okay. 5, how should we think of long-term impacts? Because some of the complex interventions we run, right, play out over time in a non-linear manner, right? Kids, might take a lot of your program, and at some point they bloom, right? May not be immediately, and different kids might, take off at different times in different ways. So how do we think of time, right, when we do anything? This becomes, of course, a crucial practical question. When should we do an impact evaluation? Right after we finished delivering a program, a little bit later, a good bit later, right? So that's an important question to ask. Number 5, how should we think of long-term impacts? 6 is something we will spend a whole session on. What are the social processes which actually occurred, right? So far, all the questions were how much impact, who was impacted, but number 6 is asking how did the impact occur? So even if I have a particular program, right, to improve maths education, is it as straightforward as, oh, I deliver some classes and kids just, improve, right? I mean, remember our discussion for TINP of the theory of change, right? There might be less straightforward practical ways in which impacts occur. So we are calling them social processes or impact processes, and we'll spend some time trying to really. By the way, question number 6 is relatively less asked in impact evaluation. One of the critiques of mainstream impact evaluation is that it only tries to establish how much impact, but not how did the impact occur. So number 6 is about the how question. Yeah. And 7th is the question about values that we bring to impact evaluation and specifically participation. Just as we can ask the participatory question for elements of design? Did you create a theory of change in a participatory manner? Did you do an impact evaluation in a participatory manner? What would it look like, right? To get people's voices regarding impact, right? Rather than some external surveyors going and trying to measure impact. So this is the set of questions that we are going to slowly over a few sessions try to address, starting with the very first. Yes.
It's 13 minutes into the session, and is it too early to ask a question?
No, not at all. Please go ahead.
See, so increasingly, when I look at the flow chart, input to outcome. So when we are talking about impact assessment, so on one hand, we are talking about the output assessment, and then we are talking about the outcome assessment as well, right? Both of them.
No, impact is, remember, output, right, was the implementation space. Outcome is the social space. Remember, I don't have that figure handy, but we put up that figure a few times earlier, right? So think of it as there is a program space, right, where you initially design it and then you implement it. There, things are a little more in the control, right? What are the activities you choose to do in your program and what are the outputs? So you can deliver your classes, right? In TINP nutritional counseling, if you remember, right? Now, whether those nutritional counseling classes will somehow translate into these women changing their feeding practices at home, that is outside the immediate program space. That is what we can call the social space. Right. In that case, it was in the home space, but in an education program, right, it might be something else. I mean, how do kids learn, right? It might be a lot of latent learning. It might be the home space. It might be the playground. It might also be the classroom, right? But it's outside. So just to be clear, outputs are things like, I'm going to design a certain curriculum. I'm going to execute it, right, through various sessions to a bunch of students, right? These are all well-known activities which lead to outputs, right? But the whole point of the program is not to deliver sessions, but to hope that through those sessions, something changes in the lives of these kids, right? Maybe their learnings change, maybe their aspirations change, whatever it is, right?
So
that's outcome.
You see, Suraj, I think a lot of that also has to do with capturing attitudinal changes, right? So can we actually, do impact evaluation like immediately after the program? I think because this is also a question that I'm struggling with in a couple of projects right now, you see. So if we talk about attitudinal change that happens due to a set of activities we undertook, so what is the right time to begin even considering measuring that attitudinal change?
Yeah, it's a fair question. We'll come to that, right? So that's kind of, so as I mentioned, number 5, which is taking the time element seriously, right? In how outcomes occur, right? It's not like switching on a switch and the light bulb gets on, right? It's almost instantaneous, right? Social programs have a cooking time and an uncertain cooking time, right? And they might play out very differently. So how do we build in time seriously into a consideration of impact is a tough question, right? And as you can imagine, there is no formulaic universal answer. It depends on your own theory, right? The ground cannot, just by looking at the ground, right, of how this happens, right, it cannot fully answer. You have to put in some I'm calling it theory, but some sense of how the world is. So we'll come to it. We'll look at some examples as well, right? But certainly it may not be the case that it's linear, that, every week learning improves by so much, right? Or every month. I mean, things can be highly non-linear, right? For a while, it might look like nothing much is happening in terms of outcome. but something is invisibly happening, and then suddenly it might, show up in a dramatic, right, change. So yeah, having a sense of time becomes important. So we will take that into account, right? But before that, we have to first get a grip on what do we mean by impact, and see, the important thing in impact evaluation, as I'll come to, is how do we attribute any change to the program itself, right? This turns out to be a difficult problem, right? So I do a program and looks like something has changed, but am I sure that it's because of my program? Because after all, many things are happening in the world, right? How do I attribute any change that I observe in terms of outcome or impact to my own program, right? So which is why impact evaluation, mainstream impact evaluation, there's a lot of language of causality, right? To what extent do I see my program as causing some outcome change, right? Because there might be many things which cause an outcome change. So how do I know how much of some observed change is because of my program? And we'll look at some examples of this. Okay, so let's first focus, and that's the plan today, on the very first question, and we'll come to. I'm just laying out all the kinds of things we should think about in the few sessions we'll be looking at for impact evaluation. Today is the very first, right? So we'll take our time in that. But yes, so in any the question of time, right, becomes crucial, and especially in things like education, right? It might be a little longer than, let us say, I give widows pension, right? My program is to distribute widows pension, right? And I set it up, and it's so it, in a sense, once I distribute it, it's done, correct? So maybe there the time element is not so important compared to slower cooking processes of education or empowerment of particular groups of people and so on, right? These are much slower cooking, and we don't know the time dynamic. So yeah, all right. So here is a kind of a simple statement of what constitutes impact. Okay, and this is from a very commonly used definition from the OECD. You will find various definitions, but they all have something along this line, which is, let me just read this this bit: the positive and negative, intended and unintended, direct and indirect, primary and secondary effects produced by an intervention. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of qualifications, but impact is the effect produced by an intervention in society, right? That is of value by itself, right? If you say a program produced so many sessions of classes or so much education material, right? That's not an outcome for society, right? That's an output. We don't, having a class is not an end in itself, right? Producing some curriculum material is not an end in itself, right? It's how people engage with that curriculum material to change their perceptions, right? Which is the outcome. So in this definition, produced by an intervention as the final social outcome, but look at the qualifications. It could be positive, it could be negative, right? It could be intended, it could be unintended. Of course, the intended will be part of it. After all, we do some kind of needs assessment, right? A program is intended to hopefully produce certain changes, but it could lead to it could trigger other changes. Those are also as much valid as outcome, right? Intended and unintended, direct and indirect, right? One thing triggers something else, which triggers something else, which affects society. Indirect, that will count. That's the indirect is usually where the time element comes in. Lenny's question. Primary, secondary, sort of similar to this, produced by an internet. In other words, anything and everything, right, which changes in society, which we think is valuable as an outcome. It could be negative, right? A program might have some negative, what we might say, consequence. It might make certain things worse from a social value perspective. All of that is outcome. Okay. So the big point is, it's not just the intended thing that you wrote in some theory of change or needs assessment, right? Okay, that was well and good at design stage. Now you've done your program. So now everything, right, about the world which changed, which you can say is produced by the intervention, right? So this last phrase, produced by the intervention. So that's the idea that you're attributing some kind of causal effect on the intervention. It's because of your intervention, produced by, right? That it was triggered by, caused by your intervention. That's the tricky bit. How do you know, even if there was some change, that it was produced by your intervention, right? We'll come to that. All right. That's one. And very soon I'm going to come to an example, which we will discuss, you know. But so I'm just setting the stage. So the other thing I want to mention, right, that is that any level or scale of intervention, you can do an impact evaluation, right? So here's a quote from an article by Patricia Rogers. She's written very extensively about impact evaluation, easy to read pieces. You know, you can Google her up. And after this session, we'll share some sort of short pieces with you, those who want to read further. But this point on this slide is simply saying that at different scales or levels, you can do impact evaluation, and look at the examples that Rogers gives. So impact evaluation can be undertaken on interventions at any scale: a small local HIV/AIDS project, an entire civil society strengthening program of an NGO, right? Which might, in other words, you can do an impact evaluation of Vikramshila with all its programs. You can do an impact evaluation of a specific program of Vikramshila, right? Or a specific component of that program, right? So we're talking about different scales here. A sequence of natural resource management projects undertaken in a geographic area, a collection of concurrent activities by different organizations aimed at improving a community, right? So you can see that the way she's put it here, each successive example in this quote is of a higher scale, right, of intervention, right? So though typically when we say program evaluation, we think of program, right, a particular program, but the idea itself can be pitched to any scale. Okay, so with all that, I'm going to now just introduce a hypothetical case. And so let me just go through it. And so please, everybody, just pay attention to the details, and I'll go through it a couple of times if needed. It's pretty simple. And then what we will do is we will create 2-3 groups, because I think that model is working a little well. And you'll be given a specific question to discuss regarding this particular case. Okay, so just pay attention to the few details in this case. So here's the case. In a large school, 25 students get less than 50% marks in the standard 5 maths final exam. Okay, so class 5 students, age is what, roughly 10, 11, right? Large school. Imagine it's some kind of middle class urban setting, if you want. Yeah, a bunch of kids get less than 50% marks in the class 5 final exam. 25 students. Okay, and for this group, which gets less than 50%, their average marks is 30%. Okay, so maybe some get close to 45, some get very low, 5, 10, whatever. The average of those 25 students is 30%. Yeah, the school decides to promote all these students to standard 6, but enrolls them in a 1-year after school remedial maths program, right? Because the school decided less than 50% marks not acceptable, you go on to the next class, but it's an after school program. So you have your regular school class 6 classes, but then you stay back, and for a year, right, you go through this remedial maths program. Okay, it's a 1-year remedial maths program. I'm just stressing the details so that we have something in common in order to have our discussion on. Okay, so far so good, I hope. And the program, this remedial maths program, is pedagogically sound. You know, it's designed with good principles, consulting educationists, and it's implemented well. So we're not going to go into how exactly is it being done. Let's take it for granted that whatever is, and these are all potentially controversial things, but let's for the moment say that it's designed and implemented well, okay, over a year after school program, right? For only those kids, these 25 kids. Now, a year later, in the standard 6 maths final exam, the average mark of this group of students is 70%. Okay. Remember, a year back for the class 5 final exam in maths, their average was 30%. So now the average of this group after a year of class 6 and of this remedial maths program is 70%. Now, the question I've put in purple here, can we conclude that the impact of this program, so think of this 1-year remedial maths program, which is designed and implemented well, right? We want to know its impact. In other words, what change did it create, right? Social outcome. Here, the social outcome is children's maths abilities as proxied by the final exam. Okay. So can we conclude that program impact is proxied by 70 minus 30, because their average, right, in the class 6 final exam of these kids, these 25 kids, is 70. A year back, their average was 30, right? So that's more than double, right? The average is more than doubling. Even with the 70, it could be that a few of them are still, doing badly, 20, 30, but a few of them are doing very well. Whatever, 70 is an average. Earlier, 30 was the average, right? So here's one claim that over a year, right, the average went from 30 to 70. That's a 40 percentage point increase. That's more than double. And that's a good proxy for the impact of the program. Okay, that's the claim. And hopefully now there could be many issues with it, right? So I'll go through the details again if you want, but what I propose to do, and it's hopefully a simple enough example, is let's have maybe, I think we had 3 groups last time, or yeah, a few groups, and the specific question for each group is come up with plausible reasons why this is a problematic statement, right? So come up with stories why, the 70 minus 30 equals 40, right, is a bad proxy for the impact of the program. Okay, or do you think it's reasonable, right? If you think it's not reasonable, what are the reasons why this might be a problematic claim? Okay, and it's not one. I would like you to look at different reasons why, and you'll see that those different reasons then become important when we do impact evaluation. Okay, so that's the task. But let me just make sure everybody gets this example. Large school, class 5 final exam in maths, a bunch of students get less than 50%, and for the school, that's a problem, right? So they are putting some threshold. Okay, less than 50%, you 25 kids, we are going to promote you to class 6, but you will need to enroll for this remedial maths program in addition to your regular class 6 work. And that program is well done. The remedial maths program is well done. Earlier, in the class 5 exam, these 25 kids were getting 30% on average. A year later, in the class 6 exam, they're getting 70% on average. Now, can we say that the change, 30 is before your program, 70 is after your program, therefore the difference must be because of your program, right? That's the idea behind the claim in purple, that the impact which can be attributed to your remedial maths program, right? The impact is 70 minus 30 equals 40, right? The unit is percentage points. This is the claim. So let me just, maybe I don't need this immediately. Let me just make sure that, are there any clarifications regarding the setup? I think it's simple enough right, bare minimum detail, so that you can point out what are the possible different reasons. So I'm looking for multiple different reasons, right? Why you think this is problematic. You could say, on the other hand, this looks pretty good, right? I'll believe this claim, that difference, that 70 minus 30 must be because of my program, right? You could say that. Or if you think there's a problem with it, what are the different kinds of problems, right? If you can actually almost list them, 1, 2, 3. We've come up with 4 problems, right? And here are and you even what is the biggest problem? If even if you can have a sense of that, that's the task. Yeah, I hope that's clear. Let's have a go at this. Maybe 3 groups. Rahul, how do you think we should do it in terms of discussion?
I made you the host, Suraj, so you can create the breakout rooms.
All right. Okay. Shall we? How should you think 3? How did we do it last time? I wasn't.
So we have 11 participants today. I think groups of 4 and 1 group will be of 3 people.
Okay. So 3 groups, right?
3 groups.
All right. Let's try that out.
And assign randomly.
Assign.
But I want to go with Vaishali.
No way.
We will refer to Rahul Da for all such things. So, all right. Let's take about 15 minutes. But if needed, we can stretch it a little more. But let's have a kind of, let's try to pin down, the problems we see with this. Yeah, that's really what we should try to do.